Hello, welcome to the October 3rd, 2023 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the livestream today. If you have not attended a livestream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field or simply send questions to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, realize that my ability to answer questions in real time may soon be eclipsed as questions kind of pile in. So if you don't get an immediate response to your question after typing it in, just if we could refrain from repeating it, we'll go through all the questions chronologically so that we can get through them all. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase you're running, whether it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, or other Steinberg programs, which version, so if it's version 11 or 12, and which operating system, that information is often helpful. If we should have an index of all the topics covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field at the end, several hours after the live stream ends, so that way you could quickly navigate to different questions and learn. And as if you want to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you can go to cubaseindex.com, and we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that website. So you could just kind of search and just kind of type in text, and we'll go through over almost 28,000 questions that have been covered. We also want to give special thanks to Agent K and Jazz Dude, who work as moderators. They're not Steinberg employees. They just kind of do it to make it a better community for everyone and a better environment, so we appreciate their efforts. And we also want to give special thanks to Jazz Dude for his work with the Cubase Nation Discord. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, which is the U.S. distributor of Steinberg products, and I'm going to be and I'm hosting today, and if I'm presenting from just outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. So if you're watching live, please feel free to tell us where you're from and who you are. It's always fascinating to see people from all over the world. And I want to thank everyone who logged into the Zoom meetup on Friday. It was a lot of fun. I enjoy those all the time. And I guess our next one, I think, is maybe on Halloween. So look forward to seeing everyone at the end of October. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, we have a question. I am making a template and I have all instruments disabled. So I have a folder strings that contains instruments. I want, with one key command, enable disabled tracks under that folder. Okay, so I saw that this was kind of posted in advance. So I made a Project Logical Editor preset for this. So, so if we have a folder that is selected, so this will be based on let me clear my throat, based on this selected folder. And we're going to set preconditions where we say channel and track visibility, we're going to show selected. And that's going to hide the other tracks. And then we're going to say we're going to unfold tracks, and this will work if the track is folded or unfolded. And then we want to, in our event target filters, we're going to choose select for our action here. And we want to choose audio, MIDI, group, and effect. And this way we could disable all these or enable all these tracks. And for the Boolean condition over here, we want to just say this may default to and we want to switch this to or. So we're going to say, okay, we're going to only show the selected tracks. We're going to unfold the tracks. We're going to select all these tracks. And then we're going to, in the post-process commands, choose audio disable/enable track. And we can say channel and track visibility show all, so afterwards. So at this point I have a number of tracks that are in this folder, so instrument tracks. So I'm going to run this Project Logical Editor preset. If I did it correctly, we'll see that there are now all of those particular tracks in the folder are disabled. And with this same command, I could choose to, again, come over here. We'll just run the same command. And now they're all enabled. So just create a project logical editor for this. Again, we want to, in the pre-process, we want to choose channel and track visibility, show selected, project folding, unfolded tracks. We're going to select audio, MIDI, group, and effect tracks. And we want to, after they're selected, we want to disable or enable them and then go back to showing all the tracks. Next question, panning instruments. I want to create a few key commands for panning, one that pans the instrument extreme left, one mid left, one center, one mid right, one extreme right. Okay, so if I created a logical editor preset for this, so I'll just come over to this event and I'm going to do the panning with a MIDI CC message. So we'll come over here, we're going to have our CC10 and we see that there's no panning message. Now generally the project logical editor needs an existing MIDI event to do processing on, but there's a little sneaky move we could do with this. So let's come over to our logical editor and we'll go to setup. And you'll see that we could say we want to insert, and we're going to say type is equal to note and velocity bigger than 0. So, and what we're going to do is basically take the note velocity value here. So let me just add velocity. So we can see our velocity information here in panning. And then we're going to we're going to say type, we're going to set to a fixed value controller. And value 1, we want to say value 1 is the controller that we want to do. So we're going to say CC10, and we say value 2 is going to be set to a fixed value of 0. So at this point, when I run this, even though there's no existing MIDI CC data, we're going to take the value of this note velocity, value 2 of the note, and we're going to use that as the basis for adding the panning message and then transforming that to a fixed value of 0. So I come over here, I can hit apply, and now we have panning of 0. If I come over and let's say we'll do 63, this will be panned in the center. So we could just come over here and we could pan at various levels right here. So at this point we could choose to say, okay, that's going to be hard right, but if we go to 63, this will be in the center. So you can see that at the center point there, and you could just put in other values, save these as presets, and then you could recall those presets to put the panning MIDI CC in, and it'll place it at the same position of where like the first note is. All right, and we could do something very similar for okay, we see a third question. With one key command, I want the CC11 expression, CC1 modulation, and velocity to appear. Okay, so if we have these that are, we can create controller presets. So let's say I want to see velocity. I want to, and I may have already have a preset set up here. So we say, okay, I have velocity modulation. We can click on the plus sign. So now we can see velocity, modulation, and expression. So if we want to, we could come over and we'll see this little drop down menu. We will choose to organize presets. So we can see that this, when we look at our list of presets, will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is our 6th preset. So we'll hit OK. And what we want to do now is we could recall that with a key command. So let's say I switch this to view only velocity. and we go into our key command. So we'll go to your edit menu. Let's go to key commands, and from our key commands, I think we could just type in controller. All right, and we'll have controller lane set up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So since that is the 6th one in our list, we could assign a keyboard shortcut, and I think I've already maybe assigned this to my MIDI remote. So if we look at this, we'll say our very first one, we're going to recall controller lane setup 6 from this. So I've assigned this particular function in the MIDI remote. So now when we want to look at the panning information for this, I hit that button, and we'll go from velocity only to velocity, modulation, and expression, either with your MIDI controller or a dedicated keyboard shortcut. So I'll just hit this on my controller, and we can just recall your various MIDI CC configurations for yourself. Okay, also, we see fourth question. With one key command that creates a value for modulation, for example, I press that key command and it creates a value for modulation, for example, 127. Okay, so this would be very similar to the panning. So we'll go to our MIDI logical editor. And we'll go to setup, and I think I have a preset. Okay, so we're going to say, so I created a preset, and it's very similar to what we had here. So we're basically going to take our note and the velocity that's bigger than 0, and then we're going to insert a fixed value of a controller. We want to use controller 1, which is modulation, so that's a value 1 of the controller. Value 2 of that controller is the value that you want. So when I hit apply, this should automatically, we should see the modulation go to 127 automatically. So you could use the logical editor. So generally, you know, the logical editor is designed for, you know, altering existing information. So with this key command at the top, what we're doing is taking the existing information and turning it into MIDI CC that we could then put a fixed value on like that. All right, so we have Thomas checking in from Norway. Okay, so we have a question from Learn with Steven. Hi Greg, Cubase 10.5 AI used my live bass guitar track to make hit points. When I clicked make MIDI notes, I get a MIDI track, but how do I now attribute that MIDI to a VST or Hallian instrument? So if it's going to be just like an audio bass line, you know, with Cubase 10.5, you can do the hit points. And I'll just show a different example here. Let me just save the other project first before I do. All right, so let's come over here. So the hit points is generally meant for maybe not tonally based components or parts. So it may not do kind of what you're looking to do if you wanted to kind of mimic like the bass line to MIDI. So if we come over here, we could say, okay, we have our bass part. And if we find the hit points, so let's say we'll double click, go into sample editor, we do our hit points, and you may see a create tab. I'm not sure if this is in the AI version. And then you can say, let's create MIDI notes. All right, so what we're going to do now is we can put on our MIDI notes, and we could, assign it to a couple of different ways. One way is if we have an instrument track that's already loaded. So let's say we have a Hallian Sonic and we have a bass. And let me just... Okay, so we'll just load up a quick bass part here. All right, now if we go here to our hit points, the hit points don't necessarily find the rhythmic. It will find the rhythmic parts of the file, but not necessarily the pitch. So we'll just come over here and say, okay, these are our hit points that we want. So when I have the Hallian Sonic track selected, what we could do is we'll create MIDI notes. So we'll say MIDI notes, and here we see that it's only going to be like on one particular note. So I hit OK, and then where you see destination, we could choose just to put it onto the first selected track. Then this is automatically going to go directly to the track where you have the bass loaded up. But again, it's only going to be, it's not going to do kind of a melodic transcription. If you wanted to do kind of more of, and we can see that when we look at the MIDI event, that it's only going to be one particular pitch. And this is often used for like drum replacement, so that we could take the kick of an instrument and convert that and replace it with different samples. If we wanted to kind of get the melodic contours of the bass part, we would have to use, and I think this is in Cubase, Artist or higher, where we could go to Vary Audio, and Vary Audio will determine the pitch, and then we could just come over here and say Extract MIDI. And then as we do that, now we could have kind of more of the melodic contour, but I don't think that's in Cubase AI, unfortunately. All right, so we see from Thomas asks, last time you mentioned the P key command. I use that every day now. Time savers, that makes such a difference. Quick tips series for navigating quickly within sessions would be great. I know that they are there, but it's so hard to find all the ones that could be useful for me. Okay, so let's just jump back to our other project that we had. So just some navigation that we could do. All right, so obviously we could come over and P will set the, I'm going to activate the project. Okay, so when we select an event, P can play, can set the left and right locators around the event. So select the event, P. Also, if you wanted to hit Alt or Option plus P, that could just immediately start playing the part as well. So you could just come over here and kind of loop that particular part. Now, some other navigation things that people miss often is, let's say if I'm here, using the N key, whether you're in, that will take you to the start or end of the particular event. And if you're in a MIDI part here, so let's say I just So let's say if I'm here and I just hit N or B, and we have, let's say, a MIDI note selected, that, you know, we could now use the arrow keys. If we have a audio event and we want to go to like the next hit point, so let's say if I'm here in this particular event, we could hit Alt or Option, Alt or Option. Sorry, got my modifiers messed up. And that could take you to the next hit point within the selected audio file, so you could navigate to the rhythmically significant points. So that's a good one to use. Also, if we have many events on a particular track, you could use the left, right arrows. And if you wanted to go, you know, up to different tracks, use the down arrows and up arrows, and then you could navigate just like that. So if you want, and if we say I want to select a couple of tracks after this, hold down the shift key plus the left and right arrows, and then you could select previous events or from this event, you know, going forward. You could do that. Now, if we also hold down Control or Command plus the left and right arrows, we could just move events like so. And if you, so those are a couple of good, and this is moving it by, you know, the snap value. So if we kind of zoom in here where we see one measure, so now we could just, you know, move particular events over by one measure to the left or to the right, holding down a control key. So those are some, you know, great navigation keyboard shortcuts to get around your project. So let me know if that's helpful, Thomas, but I'll see if I could kind of compile them into a future tutorial. We see Learn with Steven says, he says he feels the same way in the navigation. He says Control Alt scroll zooms in track beautifully, found that last week on Windows. So yeah, if you want to just use your mouse scroll wheel, we could go up and down on tracks. If we hold down the shift key, we could go horizontally left to right in the tracks. And if we hold down Control or Command, we could just kind of zoom in on horizontally on particular tracks. So those are also some nice navigation points that you could do. All right, wonderful to see Uno Memento from Finland. Glad you could make it today. Great to see Peter from Montreal. Hope you're doing well. All right, great to see Nick from Essex. Hope you have your webcam sorted out for next Zoom meetup so we could see you. But it's great to catch up with you on the Zoom. All right, so we have Stefan from Sweden. All right, we have Patrick Manuel A. Just says, hi, Greg, happy to be on live. We're happy you can make it today. Dallas LaRue checking in from Las Vegas. Cubase Jan from Cubase Index giving kudos to Jazz Dude for the Cubase Nation Discord. All right, we see Soren is on marker 250 of 880. So he said it might be a while before he gets them to me. So yeah, as soon as you get them, just send a marker track over, or just send a project with just a marker track, and we'll get it converted for you. All right, so we see I have a 3-note pattern. I have to duplicate it to the end of the part. Is there a way to extend pattern to the end? I could do it with MIDI Logical Editor without without using Control D options, how to create macros for it. So let's say if we have just a MIDI event, we'll do one. It's just like 1 bar long. All right, I'll just erase this. So let's say we want to start on okay, so let's say we have our event that maybe looks like this, where it's not, I wanted to copy this measure of data. But and a lot of times what happens in the MIDI editor itself, if we select this and we hit Command D to duplicate, it just kind of places the events directly after. So one thing that you could do is hold down Command Shift I. That will take you into the in-place editor. And and this is basically like a key editor on the main screen. I'm going to use the range tool to select the particular range. And now that we have the range selected, I could just hit Control D and duplicate and still keep kind of the space at the beginning, at the end, because we're duplicating kind of the one measure in time as opposed to the notes. And then you could just hit Control or Command plus Shift plus I to open that up and close. So let me know if that will work for you, Patrick. All right, wonderful to see Michael Marshall from Somerset in the UK. We see Benny from Sweden. All right, we have Yorgos checking in from Athens, Greece. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so we have Eric Ross just says, Greg, if I assign a MIDI controller to just transport controls, how do I do that and save it so I don't have to set up the MIDI controller every time I open a new project? So if it's set up in the MIDI Remote, so once you have like the MIDI Remote, I have like a Korg Nano control. So you could basically just kind of make an outline of what the particular keys and buttons are on your controller one time, and then you could just assign these. So if we choose, okay, I want to take this, right click on a transport, and then we could assign a button. It doesn't have to look exactly like your controller. And then I can say, okay, I want to assign play to this button. I press the button, apply the mapping, and now when I close this, that's just going to do play for me. So we could assign this, and then you don't have to load that in every project. And that came in version 12. If you have like version 11, we could just come to your studio setup. And many of the controllers may work as Mackie control, but you could also set up a generic remote. So click on the plus sign, and then you could add a generic remote, and you could say, you'll see this little function here that's learn. So you can say, okay, this button, I just press a particular function here. We say we're going to map it to the correct MIDI input and output ports, and then you could just hit the button, and we think of this top choice here and is doing this particular function. So we say, okay, I want this to do transport, and I want it to be device, and we'll choose stop. So we could just kind of come over here, and if you just wanted to type in and say, okay, this is now assigned to stop. So once you set up a generic remote or a MIDI remote, those settings will persist no matter what other projects you open and close. So get it set up once, Eric, and then you'll be all set. All right, so we see Spike Williams saying greetings from greetings Cubase family from Rhondda in Wales. Thanks for joining us. All right, so Patrick's question is there a way to select all the places where it peaks and normalize it to prevent clipping? Can I create macros for it each time I create a peak automation? I saw it in Reaper for normalizing. So I know we could do it in Wavelab, but let me just... All right, so I think we could do this in Wavelab. Is kind of set up for this. So let's say if I come over here and I say edit in Wavelab. Here we could just, and once we do this, we could say, okay, let's do, so there's a couple of different ways. One is just to find, so if we do just a global analysis of it. All right, and then you could have it automatically navigate to peaks. So once we come over here, we could just say, so then it could automatically navigate you to peaks. One other thing you could do in Wavelab, I know this isn't inside of Cubase, but let's say if we go to, there is kind of like an automatic error detection. See if I can find it. Okay, so we can say, so at this point you could just automatically find, let's say, the whole audio file, and then you could, you know, search for particular errors if you have any errors. So I don't have any errors in this one particular file, but you know, so some of those functions are kind of built into Wavelab, but a lot of times you could visually see where you have peaks as well inside of Cubase and just bring it down. All right, great to see Augie. It's great to have you on the live stream. Thanks for joining us on the Zoom meetup. All right, and he's checking in from New York. Wants everyone to hit the like button, please. So. Okay, so we see from Filter Freak question, is there any way to enter the SDM without being forced to install add-ons, i.e. Media Bay, as the last forced install messed up my maybe my Halion 7 media up, made it very laggy on the browser. So I guess it's the Steinberg download. Is it the Steinberg download manager that when you say SDM? So, I mean, Media Bay was kind of set up to be consolidated so that it would be the same between Halligan 7 and Cubase. So if you do like a rating in Halligan 7, it's automatically carried over. But let me know if Filter Freak, if the SDM is a Steinberg download assistant, what you mean by that. All right, wonderful to see Value checking in from Vienna. All right, so we see Patrick asks, while scoring, I want to select notes, all the notes with the same articulation for selected events, like all violins and bass. Should I use MIDI Logical Editor, or we have any other way to do? So, all right, let me just put in some different notes here. Or I'll just creating a project here we could pull up quickly. Okay, so let's say we'll just put in some articulations here. So I think it might depend on if they are set up as attributes or directions. I think we're currently set up to directions. Let me see if we switch these to attributes. Because the attributes are actually tied to the notes. Just make this full screen so you can see it a little better. Okay, let's just make sure. Okay, so let's say we'll So once you have that done, you could just select the articulation. So once they're in attributes, so let's come over here. So as soon as we come over, and I think if we hold down, let's see if we hold down Shift. So we could select the attributes, and then those particular notes will be selected. So if we wanted to change those together, you could do it like that. So let me know if that will work for you, Patrick. All right. Great to see Mark Raven, but sorry to read that you're on the Colorado-New Mexico border with a flat tire. It's never a good time to get a flat tire, but at least you have Stella with you and she's happy, so that's good to know. All right, so we have Parabot2 checking in from Australia. Thanks for joining us. Probably 3:40 in the morning your time, so thanks for being on with us, being our Southern Hemisphere connection. All right, so we see from Patrick Emanuel, you just see, all right, on Score Editor, note appears while I play in MIDI. What's the settings, the easy way to get all the lyrics to Score Editor? Is it possible I need it for tabs to giving notes with lyrics? Should I type? So let's say if we're looking at this in our Score Editor, it's probably not the best lyrical concept, but we could, if we go to our other symbols, we could go to lyrics. And now once we start typing and you hit the tab key, that will take you to the next note. I'm just going to zoom in here. So just hitting the tab key will allow you to just enter the notes in. So again, just select the lyrics here. So, and now if you come over, you could choose to just, if you grab the hand tool, and as you would move a note, you would have the lyric automatically move with it. So just grab the lyrics, kind of click, and hit the tab key, and that will take you to different notes. If you have it in a clipboard, you could also go to, so if you have it like copied, one of the things you could do is if you go to scores, and I think if we go to, but you could also just kind of paste lyrics from clipboard. So I'll just quickly open up my project notepad. Okay, so just kind of type some, we're going to copy this. And now I'm going to select this particular note. And we go to our scores menu, functions, and we can say lyrics from clipboard. And then that way you could just kind of paste the lyrics in as well. So a couple different ways of quickly getting the lyrics in. All right, great to see John Costigan on. All right, so we see, hello Greg, any news for Cubase 13? So no, there's nothing to share. but as soon as it's available, we will, be happy to do kind of a lengthy Cubase 13 walkthrough of all the new features. So John Costigan is wondering how Mark Rabin taught his dog Stella how to change tires. It's impressive. When I was in high school, I had a boss when I worked construction whose dog could go and get the hammer from the toolbox in the truck and bring it and walk it up a ladder. So, all right, we see Nick is mixed his granddaughter's tune the other day. That must have been a lot of fun. All right, you see Jazz Dude says great Project Logical editor / macro presets. Thanks, Craig. If you want, I could send them along. If you send me just a brain cramp reminder email, I'd be happy to share them as well. All right, great to see Martin checking in from Germany. All right, always wonderful to see Razel from Denmark. All right, so we see a question from Daja. When gain staging, what is the fastest way to lower the gain the same amount on multiple tracks? All right, so there's a couple of different ways to do this. If we go, let's say we have our project here, we go to our mix console. And it could depend if you have existing automation or not. So let's come over here. So let's say I want to take like the gain on all of these tracks here. So I take like all my drum tracks. So if you don't have automation, you could just grab Q-Link or hit Alt-Option plus Shift, and then that will quickly link all the tracks and you can keep their proportional volume. If you do have existing automation, I would select all the tracks that you want to change and right click, and then you could just say add VCA fader to the selected channels. And that way you could just now adjust this VCA fader. So even if tracks are kind of increasing in volume with their automation or decreasing, you could attenuate all of the volumes of the tracks using the VCA fader. So, and that won't affect the existing automation. That will work kind of in concert, in conjunction with your automation. All right, so we see Patrick Manuel A says sequencer in Cubase. So I have to update it to today's model work on it because I feel it's a very old model. I hope they update it in 13. So we'll see what's new in Cubase 13. But the kind of the sequencing has been kind of a staple feature in Cubase for 40 years almost. So in Steinberg products, so we can't change it too much because too many Oscar-winning composers would be upset as well. All right, so we see, I think it's from Marcos. Hey, Greg, giving my license, I have to receive a newer code from Steinberg and not get mine or not give mine to the newer owner. I really want to give this LE12 to a friend. I'm not using. So, if you've activated the license already, I don't think that you could, necessarily get a new license to give to your friend. So, once it's been, if you have like a Cubase LE that you activated, then, you may have to go through a license transfer, which may be more of a hassle, but that license has already been activated. And we can't, you may have to look at the Steinberg website for that to do a transfer of the license. If you didn't activate it, it would be different. I think you could just have your friend do the activation. I'm not sure if that's, appropriate for the licensing terms, but I think once you've activated it, you can't necessarily give it to someone else because per the licensing. All right, so we have Lurking is Life asks, hey Greg, how do you make the Mixel console more colorful like yours? Mine only has a little bit of color at the bottom, but not the whole track like yours. Okay, so when we go to, it's just going to be a preference, and so we can see this even better when we go to like the full mix console view. So all you have to do is go to Preferences, and we'll see User Interface, and we'll see track and mix console configurations. And then you just want to check mix console color. So if yours looks like this, all you have to do is just come over here and activate the mix console colors. So once again, Preferences, if you're on Mac, it's in the Cubase menu. Windows, it's going to be on the Edit menu. So User Interface, tracks and mix console channel colors. Make sure that the mix console channels are just checked, and hit apply and OK. All right, so wonderful to see Dwight Cunningham checking in from Bahamas. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Hope you're well. All right, my chat field just jumped. Let me just... find where I was. Okay, so I think I'm close. All right, so we see from Soren, Greg, you showed a lot of navigation ways. I want a key to go to the middle of an event where the clip gain and other things. Now I have to zoom the event horizontally to get to the middle. Okay, so let's say if we have events here, so let's say I have these cut up in very small amounts. So let's say I'll just cut this like every okay, so let's say I have these kind of cut every beat. I mean, so let's say if we're here and you just have the event, one other thing that you could do is you'll see there's just a volume control right here in the info line. So if you don't want to necessarily zoom in, so let's say we have this cut, we could see what part is active, and this is the same as adjusting kind of your clip gain volume just directly from the info line. So we zoom in, and I'll just make this so whatever event is selected, you could just grab the info line volume and be able to adjust right there without having to zoom. So that way you don't have to necessarily zoom in, whatever part is selected, I could just come over here, and as we just kind of zoom in, you could just make that change right there, because it gives you the same exact thing without having to zoom in. So let me know if that would work for you, Soren. All right. All right, so we have Midnight Shadow just saying, hey, Greg, so thanks for joining us today. Michael Pierce is on, says, hoping everyone is safe and well and loving October. So yeah, it's hard to believe it's October already, but, and Mark Raven is saying that the soup is on him today, so. All right, Midnight Shadow asks, is it possible to add all metadata to WAV files in Cubase 12? I've tried many different ways to do so, but YouTube doesn't recognize any copyright. So it could depend on what information that, so we could have copyright information embedded, but it may not be the same, the one great thing about metadata standards is there's so many of them, and so many of them just kind of aren't recognized. So like if you do like an export audio mix down, you could put in, let's see if it's in, or I think you could actually just do it within kind of the particular files. So, or if you go to like your preferences, so you could have this as part of every file. So I think if we go to, is it under personalization? So here you could have like your company name and author name. So that way that will be included when you export. But also if you want to come over, and if we have just a WAV file selected, we go to your media bay. We could click on the attributes here. So we could see stuff like, the author, but you could also click on the setup. And here there's probably, copyright information text. So if we, and these are kind of the standard AES protocols. So as soon as we come over here, you can now just say, okay, we want to go to copyright information, and you could enter in a value directly for the copyright, whether that gets read by YouTube or not, or whether someone does an encoding and encodes it from one platform to another, and then it's not, the metadata isn't carried over in the encoding, but it could be added inside of Cubase or WaveLab. And again, just go to F5 and just click here, and then there's for any of the files, you could just put in different attributes that you see fit. So but it's it's a lot of the platforms do and don't want to look for copyright. So I find that YouTube is very good at finding something that is copywritten and then trying to get you to run an ad because it's using a copyrighted material, even if the person whose copyright you allegedly violated never sees that. So they kind of collect the money, I think, and have it in a pot in case someone calls them up. But it's always funny when a Bach piece gets copyright flagged. was like, oh, I thought it was public domain. So it was like 17th century. Yeah. All right, so we see a question from Andy Shaw. Hi, Greg Novice, Cubase 12 Pro, Windows 11. How do I insert a string section MIDI from a Sibelius Ultimate into, I guess, let's see, AWAO full template, individual tracks, please. I have both on Cubase, but cannot merge either. Let me just see if there's more. Okay, so I don't see it continued. So how do I insert a string section MIDI from Sibelius Ultimate with the full template? All right, so let's just come over here. I'll just do kind of a quick orchestral. Okay, so let's say I want to merge a MIDI file. Let's see if I have a MIDI file we could use. So I'm going to import MIDI file, and it'll ask you, do you want to create a new project? So I'll say no. Let's look, see if we have, okay, so we have a MIDI file here. And then that MIDI file is automatically placed directly into the project window right there. And if we want it to, let's say, take that information, I want it to go directly at the cursor position, we could just say, move to event starts to cursor, stuff like that. So if when you go to import a MIDI file, it'll ask you, do you want to create? Just say no, and then the MIDI information is imported into the current existing project. So let me know if that's helpful. I feel that part of your question maybe got cut off, maybe it was too many characters or something. So, but let me know if that'll work for you, Midnight Shadow. All right, so we see Gerald Ely says, morning, Greg. Just as I tune in, Greg has shown navigation tricks with the scroll wheel. Didn't know I could do that. So yeah, there's all sorts of great stuff you can do with scroll wheel. Okay, so we see from Patrick, Greg, is there a way to put draw a note on every offbeat, in on, and in on beat? I know we can select, but I wonder if it's possible to draw, like put notes on every fourth beat. I mean, you could, let's say if we're here, we just... All right, let me just check my... So you could kind of just do this with probably a macro as well. Okay, so I'm just going to make a macro that we get my right keyboard shortcut here. All right, let me just find a key command. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to set this to beat. Okay, so let's just make a macro here. I'll show you. I mean, so what you can do is, let's say if we have just see if my mouse may have just died on me. Let me just plug my mouse in. Give me just a second. Always forget to check plugging your mouse in before a live stream. Okay. Okay, so we'll just double click here. Go to bars and beats. All right, so right now I have my grid set to beat. So if you hold down, and I'll just set this to quarter note. So even if you wanted to hit the command or control key and the plus sign on your keyboard, you know, but you could also just do this pretty easily using like step entry. So let's say if I'm here, sorry, just added a super long note. See if it comes back. I may just take it down real quick. All right, let's exit out of Cubase real quick here. Oh, all right. So, you know, while you're in step entry, you could just hit the just do it in a different project here quick. All right, so we have step entry turned on, and let's just say, okay, you want it to be so you can hit the right arrow 3 times and just put stuff on the 4th beat. So hit the right arrow 3 times, but in step entry, play a note in step entry, and then you could just do stuff like that as well. So that's kind of an easy way of being able to do it. You could also, use logical editors to shift positions over, 1 beat. So there's all sorts of different scenarios. You could just put it on off beats. All right, wonderful to see Brian Sawyer from Beulahville, North Carolina. Glad you can make it today. All right, we have Larry B checking in from Brampton, Ontario. All right, so we see Patrick Emanuel just asking when the next Zoom meeting is. So I think it's going to be the last day of October. We just had it on Friday. So, but we'll see if we get a special guest who maybe doesn't have kids that are doing Halloween in the U.S. But it'll be, I think it's October 31st. Maybe someone could check the calendar, but I believe that'll be the last live stream in October. All right, so we see Brian Sawyer says, why wasn't this announced on YouTube? Inquiring minds want to know. So we didn't do anything differently. So we kind of, it was scheduled as normal. So maybe the YouTube notifications didn't go out. So. All right, so we see from Donald Duck, my Cubase trial ends in 2 days. By version 12 or waiting for 13, not easy. So generally what happens is, if a release is imminent, there is a grace period update. So at that point, you could just simply run, and if you bought Cubase 12 generally within a month of release of Cubase 13, then you would automatically get a free update to Cubase 13. So. All right, so we have Chris Hallam listening in from Athens, Georgia. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so we see from B Dragon, I have a project that's always shutting down with a corruption error. It's a big orchestral VST project. My RAM and CPU usage seems fine. Anything I could do to fix that? So probably it could be, at a certain point when you're doing, especially if it's like VST3 instruments, it could be there's a setting. One preference to check is if you go under preferences to VST to plugins, there's let's see if it's in here. If you go to plugins, you could try toggling suspend VST3 plugin processing when no audio signals are present. And with VST3 plugins, what could be happening is like maybe a very dynamic section where there's lots of plugins going on, that those plugins turn on and it could, make your CPU, make your audio performance rise up. So it's also check to see if you're doing a large orchestral project that, you don't have 16 instruments loaded into an instrument that could only take one processing core. So many samplers and workstations, if you have 16 violin patches, 16 viola patches in one instrument, as opposed to one patch in 16 different instruments, those don't allocate across the CPU cores. One other thing to do is to take the project, and if you go to import, you can disable projects. So just take the tracks and enable disable tracks and see if you disable particular tracks, if they cause problems. Like if tracks are disabled, does it play back? So maybe disable 5 tracks at a time, or disable all the tracks and let it play with 8 tracks at once and kind of build up, do 8 or 10 tracks and enable them and see if it plays, because you might be able to find one that is kind of, the one track or one instrument that might be pushing it over the edge. One other thing you could do is if you go to your file menu, go to a new project, and you want to go to your file and import tracks from project and select your particular project. So you can say, okay, I want to take this project and open it up, and you could try to import the settings into a brand new project and see if that plays. If that's still causing problems, try importing, half the tracks, see if it plays. Import, 10 more tracks, see if that plays. Import 10 more and see how that works for you. But, a large CPU, a large orchestral project can take up a lot of CPU and memory. So, but it's not necessarily CPU, it's audio performance. And, the first answer to this is always going to be to make your computer run a little easier once you're in kind of the editing and mix stage, is just to select your audio interface in your studio menu to studio setup and increase the buffer size and see if that. So those are a couple things you could check. All right, so we see, hi, is there a way to have a plugin already be inserted on a track when I import audio? All right, so let's give it a shot. So we'll add an audio track here. Okay, so let's go to my insert. Okay, so we have plugin, and let's see if that track is selected. We go to import an audio file. So with that track selected, we could import the audio file, and that file goes to the track, and we see that our plugin is still there. Also, you can, if you have a track with the plugin on it, you can just drag and drop files from the media bay right onto the track with the plugin on it. All right, so we see question, which of the Groove Agent 5 libraries will be working without dongle? Which ones works with the new Steinberg system? So I think just about all of them have been updated. We'll go ahead and take a quick look. All right, so let's come over here. All right, so we'll just say so I'm just going to Google what programs are working under Steinberg licensing. All right, so obviously Groove Agent. So here's a full list. So the sound content. So you can see just about all of the different ones. So you could just Google like which ones, you know, like Marco Miniman's a great one. Like, also Nashville's great, and you know Simon Phillips one. So I think just about all of them are working currently under the Steinberg licensing. So that's a good resource you could use. All right, so we see from Daja, perfect, Greg, thank you. Or thank you, Greg, perfect. Glad it worked. All right, always wonderful to see you, Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. Glad you can make it today. Hope you had a wonderful birthday on Friday. It's great to see you on the Zoom meetup. All right, we see Lawrence Koch checking in from Rhode Island. Glad you can make it today as well. Thanks for joining us. See, mixed console colors is a revelation of the moment. All right, so we see Matt Lewis asks, hi Greg, I have Cubase 11 Pro, is wondering if it comes with a denoiser for cleaner audio. So Cubase doesn't have any restoration plugins, but if you have Wavelab, even Wavelab Elements and Wavelab Pro both have kind of audio restoration components. And there's some audio restoration within Spectral Layers Pro is wonderful restoration capabilities. But nothing that comes as part of Cubase. You may be able to do you could do spectral editing with the Spectral Layers 1, but there's no like specific denoising functionality in Spectral Layers 1 that comes with Cubase 11. Okay, reading through comments. See, Soren says, nice solution for the clip gain. Glad it works. All right, so we see, hi Greg, is it possible to make shared MIDI copies after you've copied clips around? Sometimes I've already arranged a song. It'd be handy to select clips and choose make shared copies. So I think the shared copies functionality, you kind of have to do it initially, and it can't really be added after, but let me just try something here. Okay, so let's say if I don't think that the grouping would work the same way, but I'll give it a shot here. So let's just group these together like Control G. And now if I edit one, I don't think this will work. You know, the grouping is more. Yeah, so unfortunately there isn't, so you'd have to define the shared copy before. And I realize that, you know, there's obviously times you'd want to have the flexibility to do it after the fact. But usually they're pretty easy to kind of copy again, the MIDI parts. see, Clarence asks, hello everybody, how many questions about Cubase 13 we got already? And then Gothic Melancholy just says Cubase 13. So, all right. So we see, joking aside, any news about the store? So yeah, Steinberg had announced last week on Friday that the provider, the facilitator for our online store is going into insolvency. So they're looking for a new provider. So nothing that's been announced yet. It'll probably take, as the announcement said, it'll take a couple weeks. You could still purchase items from, like if you're in the U.S., you could get almost everything from Sweetwater, including updates. But there's also boxed versions that are available in the dealer channel. So, but no developments. I'm sure there's a lot of people in Hamburg. They're kind of staying up late, working very diligently on getting a new provider sorted out. So, always wonderful to see Tiago from Brazil. Glad you could make it this afternoon. All right, so we see from Soren, says I make a chord track to MIDI and then I open score editor on the MIDI with the full song chords. If I want to include the chord in the score sheet, it becomes messy. I want more space. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, so we have a chord track here. I'm going to drag this down. Here, I'll just take this and we'll say, go to my project menu. And we'll say chords to MIDI. All right, we look at this in our score editor. Okay, so I'm going to give it a split staff. Okay, and now I want to go to my scores menu and we'll go to advanced layout and show chord track. All right, so if you want more space between the chords, what you could do is, let's say I'm just going to hold down the first chord and double click. That will select all the chords, and then you could move them if we want more space between the staves. You could just kind of drag it down. So again, just double click here. That will select all the chords, and then you could move them. You can move it, and you see like the little grid pop up where you can move it on beat, so you can move it up higher and just give yourself more space. So let me know if that kind of works for you, but it seems like you could get stuff spaced out legibly pretty easily. All right, so a question from Cornell. It just says, hi Greg, hope you're doing well. Is there a way to map the Media Bay preview volume slider to a MIDI controller? Greetings from the Netherlands. Let's give it a try. I don't think I've ever done it, but we'll see. All right, let's just go find just some. All right, so let's see if we. right, let me just see if it's mapped to the control room volume, maybe. No. So I don't think it's controllable, but let me just take a look, see if it's maybe in a generic remote. Yeah, I don't see a preview volume, but I'll make sure to mention that as a potential future item. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'll do some more research on it. All right, great to see Kevin Liker from South Africa. All right, so we see from Soren, and this may just a continuation of the chord track question. It says, I make chord track to MIDI, then open score editor in MIDI with full song chords. If I want to include a chord in the score sheet, it becomes messy. I want more space. The notes played are so low, so they are shown under the chord there. In the score sheet, it's messy. I want some solution to get clean, just chord track to paper, some solutions. So something else that you could do, Soren, if you want just a chord track, just create kind of a blank event that's the length of the chord track, go into the score editor. And if you just want just a chord track now, if you don't want to see the actual parts, just come and say advanced layout, and we'll say show chord track, and now you could have the chords here. And again, let's give it a little more space. And if we want to just kind of come here, and if you want to just hide like the track names, you can just right click, and now you get, again, just move the chords kind of as fit with as needed for personal taste without seeing if you want just a chord track score. All right, so we see question, does Basic FX Suite require dongle? I have it from my UR44 and have some old projects using RevX. Can it be migrated to the new licensing system? I don't think that has made it over, but let's do a quick test. But it will run on, if you have, that could run on the soft e-licenser. So it can run on Softie licenser. Let me just... Yeah, so I don't see it listed, but I haven't tried it. But I could check on that and see if there's any update to the status of the basic FX suite. But yeah, those plugins are kind of done by Yamaha, so I can check with them and see. See, Michael Teams is doing his diligent ice cream distribution. Okay, so we see what's the shortcut to create a marker. So it's the insert key. So if you have a marker track, if you're on Windows, it's the insert key. So you could just kind of drop the marker on there. So I'm on Mac, which doesn't have an insert key. So, but you could remap that particular function. So if you're on Windows, it's the insert key, but Mac OS doesn't have an insert key, unfortunately. So if you go to key commands, you could just set it up to insert position marker. So go to the marker category, and then you could, activate. So you could just put it right there, but there's like an insert marker. But if you're on Windows, it's just the insert key, and you'd have to assign it Mac since there's no equivalent key. Okay, Alessandro also asked, how do I nudge my cursor position by 1 frame intervals when working with timecode? Okay, so let's say I have an event here. Okay, so let's say we have our event. So we could have our nudge set for different values. So if your master timeline is set to timecode, now we could set your nudging by frame. So as we nudge, it's now, when we look at our start time, we can see our frame right here that we could nudge by frame. So I'll move my cursor so it's not covering up. So let's say we're at 4 seconds and 5 frames. So I'm just holding down Control or Command plus the left arrow to go back a frame, the right arrow to go forward a frame. So, but if we have your master timeline set to bars and beats, in 12 we could come over here, and when we go to nudge, we could link to grid, but we could also say I want my nudging linked to 1 frame. So even though my master time format is set to bars and beats, we could have a different nudging in a different time format. So as I click here, we're still nudging by 1 frame, but we're seeing it in bars and beats. So it'll kind of default to the master timeline, but if you go to the settings and activate nudge, that you could set an independent time format for the nudging than the master time format if needed. Or if you want it to be linked to grid, now we could just move it by bar. If we change the master time to time code, now we could have this linked by 1 frame. And you could always hit the period key just kind of to the right of the space bar and go back and forth between your master. So if you want to have bars and beats and time code, you could just, I have bars and beats in seconds, but you could change between primary and secondary time display if you wanted to toggle the behavior that way. All right, so see Brian Sawyer's pulled his flooring in his studio and found black mold on the subfloors. It's awful. So I'm glad he found it now instead of much later. So good luck getting that taken care of. All right, so we have 19 Stride saying hey from Germany. Thanks for being on with us this evening. All right, so we see Patrick just says, hi, Greg. Why everything should happen with more clicks in Cubase. I wonder why everything is not more straightforward. So, I mean, it could really just depend on, like how you're going from situation to situation. But I think that once you know how to, once you configure like a logical editor preset, once you get the nudge kind of set up the way you want, that you could just, very quickly navigate all of your MIDIs, all of your editing tasks. All right, we see from 19 Stride, Glenn here, I'd like to know if I could change solo mode to default to XOR solo. So I'm not sure what XOR solo is, if it's like the listen bus. So we could come over, let's say, now that I've destroyed this song here, I'll just revert it. So, if you wanted to come here, and let's just say, you wanted to, so you could solo different tracks, or you could also do kind of listen mode, where the other tracks can get dimmed, but you still hear them. So let me know if that's what your XOR solo is. So they're kind of 2 different functions, but you could trigger them the same way. So if you wanted to assign the S key to the listen, I think you could do that. But let me know if that's what you mean by XOR solo. Okay, so we see from Pro 5000, hi, why is Cubase freezing for 2 to 3 seconds after minimizing Cubase and come back? Usually, like a lot of this, when I hear stuff like this, it could be related to, I'm not sure if you're on Mac or Windows, but if you're on Windows, a lot of it could be display driver driven. So I think if you use like the studio driver, which kind of takes off all the, like often GPUs can not cooperate so well with DAWs in general. But if you use kind of take off any of the gaming modes on that, but there could also be, if you're on Windows, run a utility, Resplendence, RESPLENDNCE, makes a tool called Latency Mon. And sometimes it could be that there's other processes that are kind of interrupting the audio performance that could cause problems like that. And often it could be display drivers, and video cards are kind of notorious for this. So I would check that. But you run the Latency Mon, and that's a pretty good utility for figuring out that something is causing interrupts for your real-time audio performance. All right, so we see 19 stride. Is it possible to automatically close an open plugin when opening another one? Or do I always have to close them manually? Thanks a lot, Greg. So I think the design intention is that you may want to see more than one plugin at a time. There's some programs in the past would restrict you to so you could only see one plugin at a time, which is kind of annoying if you're using it. So currently, Cubase will keep the plugin window open until you close it. And I think that's a pretty good, sensible approach to that, where opening one window shouldn't necessarily close another unrelated window. So, but you could always, if you wanted to come over here to the Windows menu, there is a function where you could close all plugin windows. So if you have a plugin window open, if I have multiple plugin windows open here, I could just come again to the Windows menu and just say hide plugin windows, and that would close them for you before you open one. So you have a keyboard shortcut for that. But I think it makes sense that, opening one window doesn't close other ones that are unrelated. All right, so we see Captenergy Music, just wishing everyone a great, happy, spooky season. Can't wait to see what tricks and treats Steinberg will be serving up this month, and hopefully Yamaha too. So, yeah. All right, so we have Arslan from Uzbekistan. Thanks for joining us today. I think you might be our first live attendee from Uzbekistan. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to the live stream. All right, so we see Kevin just specifying about the XOR solo that might be enable solo on selected tracks. So we'll show that preference. Thanks, Kevin, for your help with that. So let's come over. So I think if we go to editing, to project and mix console, so we could say, see if it's just maybe on just editing. Enable solo on selected tracks. All right, so let's say if I have this track soloed, so with the solo state, I can come over. This way you don't put delay on bass. So with that preference, once the track is soloed, you can just come over and but maybe you could explain what XOR is, XOR solo, that I could see if we can get a workaround. All right, wonderful to see Nick Saya on. Glad you can make it today. All right, my chat field jumped. All right. All right, great to see Daniela Tocan on. All right, we have Braxel from Texas joining us as well. All right, so we see a question, can Cubase 12 export an EDL for video editing? So Cubase doesn't do it, but Nuendo does. So that could export the EDLs, so but not in Cubase. That's one of the distinctions between Nuendo and Cubase. All right, so great to see Ted Springman on. He asks, will Cubase generate a MIDI note for a drum sound that is essentially noise? If not, can it average a single note? My purpose is to sync a Moog LFO with a drum hit matching its rough pitch. All right, so let's create just a new project. All right, so let's come over, let's add an instrument track. We'll just do Groove Agent here. Add an audio track. All right, let's just grab my test tone generator. I'll just put in some white noise. All right, so let me just take the control room volume down. Just gonna record just a little sample of this. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to drop this into my sampler track. Okay, so now when we play back this track, it's going to trigger the noise. All right, now let's just check our Alright, so I'm just going to make this, I'll make these notes more spread out to match. Alright, so let's say if we have Alright, so listen to this. So as long as we have kind of like an attack on that. Alright, so it says, will Cubase generate a MIDI note for drum sound that's essentially noise? So let's say if I want, let's say that this is broken down. So we'll mute this, and let's say we have our noise samples here. Alright, so now this will just play back. Alright, so I will just take this and I'm going to bounce selection. You don't necessarily have to do this, but it may be easier. So say, and now we go to our hit points, go into the sample editor, the hit points, create MIDI notes. Then it generated the MIDI based on the start of the events. So I'm not sure if you have space between the events, but at that point we could just take these particular notes. I'll mute this. Let's move this event up. And then we could just play back the noise samples if you wanted to trigger if they were on. So we're only listening to this top track, which is the MIDI that was extracted. So let me know if that would work for you, Ted. Okay. Okay, so you see Andy Shaw just says, I have both in project window. I want to play MIDI using individual east-west violin staccato, for example. Let me see if there's a first part of the question. Just scrolling back up for a bit. So Andy, I think I may have missed the first part of your question. I don't know if it's possible if you could maybe re-ask the first part. I just see I have both in project window. I want to play MIDI using individual east-west violin staccato, for example. So see, Michael Teen's got a flu shot for his birthday from his wife. It's not a bad gift if it prevents you from getting the flu. So it's basically giving you like 3 or 4 days of your life back. So. All right, so we have Ubakun checking in from Nigeria. Thanks for joining us. All right, we have Jeff Sabelski checking in from Chico. Glad you can make it. And he says it's not 190 degrees, finally 73 degrees. That's good. Glad it's cooling down for you. Ted Springman just says someone should do a Cubase feature chart over time, indicate how long it took other dock competitors to adopt each one and claim the features as their own. So, yes, I remember being in a demo when the Magic rep said they invented VST in front of me, so it was always fun. All right, we have a question. Hi, Greg. When using the QWERTY keyboard input to input notes in the score editor, is there a way to specify which octave the note will be input? Thanks. Okay, so let's come over. Okay, so I'll open up the score editor. All right, and if we hit Alt or Option plus K, you could see the QWERTY keyboard. So like if we wanted to just put notes in, so let's say we're doing step entry and I just want to do quarter notes, so I'll just double click here. So we could see the octave is this little white line. So if we have an instrument sound, let me just load up just a quick instrument sound so you could hear. All right, so now when I hit, all right, here, I'll just, all right. Here we go. All right, so when we open up the in-place editor, the little virtual keyboard here, now when I hit Q, if I move this up, this little line here, so now as we just want to enter in notes here, so just move the little white line below. And that would determine the octave on the virtual keyboard for you. Okay. Okay, reading through comments. Thanks for all the great comments. Okay, so we see from Daniela Tocan, but here's my question. How to get back to the normal wave editor? I can normalize the isolated dialogue voice to help it. Steinberg did not work. Can this be demonstrated by Greg? To switch from dialogue to normal wave editor. Okay, so let me just drop a quick loop in here. All right, so let's. Okay, so let's say I'm here. I have this. We go to, I think this was spectral layers. So let's say. So I load the extension. And then let's say we've done our spectral editing. Now what I often do is I will duplicate. Let's say I've done some spectral editing here. All right, and now we listen to this. Okay, so as we play this, we'll hear kind of the hole in the frequencies here.
I want more than good, 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 good.
All right, so what I often like to do is to come over here, let's duplicate the version, and I will, if you want it to, if I know, let's say I think I may have to go back to it, I may duplicate the version and then just do a bounce selection. So now I could double click, I'm in my audio editor. If I go to this version, I could be in spectral layers. Also, once you're done with this, if you click directly on this particular menu, you could choose to make the track extension, so these edits, permanent, and then you could just unload and choose no extension and go back right in. So, if you feel that you may need to go back, duplicate a track version, and then you could say, okay, here's this audio file. As we play it, we'll hear kind of the hole in the middle.
I want more than good, 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 good. I want more than good, good.
So now I could just come here if I need to go back to my spectral editing. It's right there. So again, just duplicate the track version, make bounce selection or render in place, whatever you want to do. And then at that point, we could just have both of the files easily accessible, so you could switch between the spectral view and editing view if you need to go back. If you know what you did was perfect and you're on the spectral, just click here to make the track extensions permanent, and then you're all set. That will basically render the spectral editing into the audio file. Right. See, Pro 5000 says I miss Cubase SX3, so. See, Jeff Sabelski says he has a cousin from Texas, one of the best drummers / bassists I know, unless Greg plays drums too. So I'm not a drummer, so I have an electronic kid in my studio, but not a drummer. So I appreciate great drummers. See, Ted Springman just says, Greg, did you miss the Oktoberfest celebrations in Germany? So I did. I was supposed to go over like right after, like on September 4th of this year, like last month, just about a month ago. But I had to cancel my trip because my wife was having surgery. But I'm hoping to go back maybe before the end of the year, spend some time with my German colleagues. All right, so we see Michael Teams wants everyone to whacketh the like button. So. All right, sorry, my chat field just jumped. All right, so we see question, is it possible to randomize the panning settings on multiple track selection or create a macro doing the same thing? So let's say if it's going to be, if it's going to be like the audio panning, let's see if we could do that. Okay, so let me just find a file here. I think we could play this. We have a little guitar part, courtesy of Gareth. Okay, so let's say I want to take all right, I'm just going to revert this project. All right, so let's see if we can do it with an LFO plugin. All right, so I'm going to add a MIDI track. Okay, so I want this MIDI track to go. And we can do this with like a loopback. So I'm going to say the IAC bus driver. And on here, I'm going to go to MIDI insert. Let's set up our auto LFO. I hate when it goes alphabetically and I'm just being dumb. All right, so let's get to our studio setup here. We'll go to generic remote. I'm going to set the IAC driver, and you can do this on Windows. IAC is a kind of a MIDI loopback function on Mac OS, and you get like loopback.de or loopback.be on Windows platform. So I'm just going to say, click on Learn for this function here, and we'll see if this captures the incoming MIDI note message. When we play, all right, so we'll go here to sorry, I'll just not mute that particular note. So here I just put the LFO on and I set it to MIDI 10 and we could just randomize. Then you had to set it up. So if I wanted this to be say, okay, just now I want it to be so you could just kind of set the auto LFO. And let's see if let's just see. All right, so it looks like we don't even have this turned on, so I'm just going to leave that not connected and see if it's still connecting. So I have this MIDI track with the auto LFO and the pan. All right, so I'm going to turn on the IAC driver. Then if we go to like mixer, we could just choose selected track. just kind of have it do panning. If you want to change kind of the LFO shape or the time. And if you wanted to just pan only like positions in the middle. So you can play around with that. All right. All right, so you see from Soren, Greg, I might have a music theory question, but it's Cubase related. When we create the chord track, we can have the automatic scale displayed under the automatic voices. Is that the key of the song we see? It changes a lot during the making of the song and all chords in the chord track. How come if it is the key of the song? So, it could interpret depending upon, we could say that, it is roughly, we could think of it as the scale of the song, but you could think of it as the key of the song. As you do different chord progressions, it may try to guess that you're modulating or going to different keys. You could erase those particular scale events if needed, but you could roughly think of it as a key. But, realize that the music theory, there's, chords and keys can be, widely interpreted. And with many correct answers. So it's just an interpretation of a particular key. All right, so you see from 19 Stride, double clicking and opening a backup project doesn't work. Do we always have to import a backup to a new project? All right, let me see if this is... All right, I'm sorry, it looks like my chat may have jumped ahead. Sorry about that. Let me make sure I didn't miss questions. All right, so we see from Masta LBC. Hi, Greg. Do you know if of a Yamaha controller following the Nuage or CC121 maybe? So unfortunately, Yamaha doesn't have a controller that's doing Nuage or CC121. They do have a DM3, which is a digital console that can do control surface functionality, but nothing that's kind of dedicated like the CC121 or Nuage, unfortunately. All right, so we see my L key is grayed out. So the listen bus is going to be routed through the control room. So if we don't have the control room activated, so if we go to your studio to audio connections, I'll deactivate my control room. We'll disable it. Then you can't really press on the L key, so it's going to need the control room to be active because that's where the signal routing for the control room is sent through. Okay, so we're seeing regarding XOR solo, I meant when hitting the solo, the previous solo to end so that the selected track is mixed. And at the moment, I'm pressing Command when hitting solo. So yeah, so if you're in a scenario, so thanks for the clarification for my benefit. But so to see if you could have that as kind of the default behavior. So let's say as we come here, so we can put it. So if I hold down Command, that we could, and we click on our track, that overwrites the solo. So I don't know of a way to change that behavior. We'll just look in preferences, just make sure. Yeah, so I think that's just kind of the behavior, but I'll see if maybe we could turn it into a preference for you. All right, so we see, hi Greg, hope you are doing well. In Cubase 12 Pro, how can I use a sampler to sample old piano and save as an instrument that is mapped across the keyboard without all the sounds speeding up? Thanks. Okay, so let's just come over here. I'll just add an instrument track. All right, so let's say I have this note. I'm just going to come and let's say if I'm doing it from like a virtual instrument, we could come over. Say, okay, I just want this particular note. So let's say I want that. So I'll go to my sampler track, and I'm just going to drop this note in, and then we're going to have our sampler track. Make sure that you have the C, So now as I play high, it's going to change the length. So to fix that, you can see the audio warp. Turn that on. Now it's going to play the same length for all the samples. So just make sure that you, underneath the audio warp button there, just turn that on, and then you could save it as a track preset. And all the samples are the same length. All right. Yeah, and Hallian 7 is also great for that if you want to do multi-samples. And we see from Amadeus, so yes, you could sample directly into Hallian 7. One of the few software samplers that does actually sample. Okay, reading through comments. So just seeing about from Daniela. So let me know if if that makes sense for the workflow for you for the dialogue that I showed. I think it was a little while ago, so maybe been before you asked that. All right, so we see from question from Lawrence Scott. I recently bought the Simon Phillips expansion for Groove Agent SE, and some of the drums, big floor tom and gong drum, are not accessible. Is this due to it being an SE and not the full version? Let's go ahead and take a look. I think I may have Simon Phillips on. 'Cause, 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 not have it authorized. So I think it works, but I mean, I have my license for it. But I could check if you want to email me. I'm inclined to say that all the different drum sounds would work. But if you want to email me, I could check on my personal studio computer where I have a license for it. And you could email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. But I seem to remember all, like, the big gong drums, working in SE as well. So I was just watching a video of Simon Phillips, watching his performance of, I think it was Give Blood with Pete Townsend, kind of figuring out that he played it differently live than he did in the studio. Super nice guy. Got to meet him a couple times. But yeah, please email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, we see from Best Korean Jesus, I was accessing old projects and the audio files I rendered/processed are no longer readable. There are empty events in its place. How do I connect the audio to the project to have it work again? So see if, there's sometimes it could be that the audio file there's two things that could happen. One, it could need to be found if the audio file was moved. If you weren't careful about kind of making all the samples in the project, within the same folder, and the folder itself moved. But come over to the pool window, and one is you could see if, like, you have like the waveform image here, so you may have to just say, like, image under construction. And see if you notice where the path is for the missing files, and you could look directly there. And often when you're starting, it may say, we can't find this file for the project. Now, it could also be that when you back up a project that you may have an edits folder that, maybe the files are looking in the edits folder. So let's say if we come over to, sorry, wrong one. All right, so, and it could be also be checked to make sure that, you may have files that need to be in the edits folder to draw from as well, but just check your pool. So once you're in Cubase, go to your media menu to the pool, and then you could see the path that's there. And sometimes it could be you just may have to, like, if it's playing back, but you don't see the particular waveform image, that you could, just double click here and redraw the waveform view as well. See, Jeff Sabelski is an A = 440 kind of guy as an oboist. Okay. All right, so you see from 19 Stride, it says double clicking, opening a backup project doesn't work. Do we always have to import a backup to a new empty project? So let's say if I back up, I'll open up a project here, kind of maybe smaller one. See if I have it. With audio, let me see. just open it. All right, so I have this project and I want to back it up. All right, so it's like a kind of classical thing. So I'm going to come here. Let's go to our file to backup project. All right, I'm going to choose a new folder. So I'm going to go to my desktop and we'll do new folder and we'll call it bike backup. We'll create. Now I'm going to open that folder. All right, so I'm going to keep the current project. I won't keep it active. I'm going to call this bike backup. Okay, so now I'm going to go to my desktop and we'll see bike backup. Open up that and we can see that this is our project right here, bike backup. So let me know if I did something differently than you or if so. Yeah, and I see that if it is a project that was auto saved that has a .bak file, that what you do is just rename the .bak to a .cpr file. So sorry if I misunderstood. Okay, read through comments. All right, sorry, my chat field just jumped to me. Okay. Okay, Marcus asks, question, hey Greg, is there a way to have more than 10 markers assigned to hotkeys? I can't do more than 10, thank you. So let's say we have a number of markers. So I'll just add a marker track. So there's a function that's called like toMarkerX, and I'll show you how that works. So let's add a marker track. Okay, so we have a number of markers here already. So we have 12 markers. All right, so I'm going to assign just a function or a keyboard shortcut. I'm going to do it via the MIDI Remote. All right, and I think that it's called toMarkerX. Okay, so what this is going to allow us to do is I'm going to apply that. So let's say I wanted to now go to marker 12. I could hit that button and we'll see, and you see toMarker, then I could just type in 12 and it will just navigate to that particular marker. So there is a toMarkerX. So let's say I'll just add a number of other markers here. So hit that button, say, okay, 22. Hit the button, I want to go to marker 14. Hit the button. So let's go to marker 6. So hit the button 6, enter, and then that could take you. So type the number in, and that will navigate you directly to the marker. So that way you don't have to use 100. You know, if you have 200 markers in your project, you can just hit that one key, then type the marker number in, and you'll navigate directly to there. All right, so we have Pastrin Catherine checking in from Germany. Thanks for joining us. Okay, just reading through comments. We see that popular guy Dave DeSangle is popular. All right, so we see Jazz Dudes posted the MIDI loopback for Windows. All right, so we see from Jazz Dude, Greg, about the MIDI Auto LFO linking his generator for MIDI CCs and so on. Maybe you can make a special tutorial. So I think I did an Auto LFO tutorial. So I remember like one time I was in Germany and they're like, wow, we couldn't figure that out. You did it. So, yeah. But for generating CCs, I'll work on a tutorial for that as well. All right, so we see a question from Mesa Bog 2. Greg, what is the most painless way of migrating to a new laptop? Do I have to reinstall everything or just copy folders over, such as plugins, purchased preset packs, etc.? So within Cubase, what I would do is like all like your settings, like your key commands, preferences, everything that you kind of have set up. If you get to the edit menu, you could just go to your profile manager, export it from your old machine, import it into your new machine. Install Cubase. You can take all the project folders, move them over. You could take all of the content and move it over. And in that location, what you could do is if you go to the Steinberg Library Manager, at this point, you could have a default folder. So then this is a utility that's installed with Cubase. But if you go to like the settings, you could just have your default folder here, and whatever you define as your default folder, you could automatically look in there, and you could just also just any of the VST, you'll see a .vst sound file. If you just double click on it, that will automatically make the association or use the Steinberg Library Manager to define your default location and copy all the VST sound. So plugins will probably have to be reinstalled if they're standard plugins with Cubase. It's very straightforward. If you're on Cubase 12, you just go to the Steinberg Activation Manager, and then you could activate the new computer while your old computer is still active, so you could compare settings. You can have up to 3 computers on the available running once at the with new licensing. So wonderful to see Pablo on today. It's always better and everyone's happy when Pablo makes it. Our favorite drummer from Spain. from Galicia, España, who's usually on tour. All right, so we see a question. Hi, now I make an audio tape recovery and can't automatically synchronize lips with the audio track. How does this make? Okay, so what you could do is just do a new project here. Okay, so one of the tricks you could do, is, let's say we have, so I'll open up like the video window here. And let me just, may not have, let's see if it looks like we have someone talking in the video here. All right, so let's say you need, like you have an audio event here. So one of the things you could do is, let's say there's a mode. If you go to transport, you can say use video follows edit mode. So let's say you have like the beginning of the dialogue here. What you can do is, as we have use video follows edit mode, so now as I move, I'm going to turn my snap off, the letter J, and as I move a particular event, like we could just, go down to like the frame level, and we can say, okay, right when we go to this point, this is where this dialogue starts. So again, go to transport, make sure that you turn snap off, and we want to go to transport and say use video follows edit mode. And then you could just move the audio to synchronize with the picture. And you could do this kind of frame by frame if you need to. And then you could get your lip sync coordinated. Everyone's happy to see Pablo on. All right, we see from Best Green Jesus that the pool is perfect. Thank you. So yeah, give that a try. All right, so I see from Jay from Secret Studios. Just wanted to briefly ask if the Google Drive content I shared with you functioned properly, in case there's any permissions issues or I messed anything up. So I downloaded it, and I think I got the file. I didn't get a chance to play with it because I had yesterday off from work. So I didn't get a chance to play with it, but I'll take a look at it and maybe, probably have a better answer for you on Friday, and I could email you if I have problems with it. All right, great to see Matt Elston from London. Thanks for being on with us this evening. We see Neil Conway from Oregon. All right, so we see from Gabriel Macedo, Epic Music, says Greg Man, thanks for every club you host. So I'm glad to be able to help people. All right, Michael Teams wants people to smash the like button. All right, so we see question. Hello, Greg. When you use the media search and right panel, once you hit play for the session, the audio from the right panel also plays. Is there a way to skip that option? Okay. So let's say we are here and I have my media selected. Okay. So let's say as I play, I'll just kind of play the project here. So I think it's one of the settings in here, or maybe it's wait for project play. So you see this little icon right here. If that's turned off, when you hit play in the project window, it doesn't play with this icon turned on. Then the audio file plays so that you could audition. So if that icon is turned off, then the transport won't play and align the beats with the media files there. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right. Okay, so we have Kutsu Noise Homes is Matteo from Rome, Italy. Thanks for joining us on the live stream this evening. Welcome. Okay, so we see Michael Pierce asks, oh, can the two marker control also search and navigate by marker name? That's really cool. I already did not know that. I don't think so, but let's give it a shot. Right. Okay, so let's see if I don't think that we could search by name. Let's check out the browser maybe. Yeah, I don't see a kind of like a search by marker name, unfortunately. But we might be able. Let me just see if we come here to. Let's get to Project Logical Editor. See if we can maybe trick this. so search for marker. Probably not the fastest way, but let's see if it will. So we could select if you want to have like a project logical editor. Here you could just say select the marker, and you can find a marker by name here. And so let's say I want to go to the marker 4. So we do that and then search, and then we could select and go to that position if you want it to. So that might be a way to kind of do it. It could be a little awkward, but if you had to do it, you could do it that way and just kind of leave the field blank and type the name in. All right, so you see uno momento, just saying goodnight, and he'll see us on Friday, so sleep well. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on Friday's live stream. Always so wonderful to see my Hot Mess Rhythm section compatriot in Pablo. So hello back to you, Pablo, as well. So glad that you can make it. Right. See, Pablo just mentioned coffee. Unfair. All right, so we see kind words from Neil Conway. Says thank you for all that you do and much love to the group. So I'm always glad to be able to help people along their journey. Jeff Sabelski says spectral layers is like going from Morse code to smartphones. Yeah, it's pretty scary. All right, so let's get to some questions that were mailed in advance. Let me just open those up. Thanks for all the great questions. All right, let me open up my document here. All right, so we had I think it was last week, we had a question about how to import a Cubase project as a VST Live song within a VST Live project. Okay, so I'm going to open up VST Live. Okay, so we're going to do a new project, and we can think of a project as like the show or a set where we have songs within a set. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and open this up. And last time, and I think this was from Sven Isaacson. So what we want to do is we export what's called a VST Live media project, and now we're going to import the media project. And when we do this, I'm going to select this, and we see an option here on the lower right hand corner to create a new project or create a new song. So I'm going to create a new song, and we hit OK. So this would be, let's say, song 1 of our set, and instead of having a set with only one song, which kind of defeats the purpose of like a VST Live type of tool, we could say let's import a media project again, and we'll import this, and again we're going to choose create new song as opposed to new project. Hit open, and now we could have song 1, song 2, and these could all be within the same project within VST Live. So when you go to import, what I missed and had my brain cramp on is I just had create new project instead of create new song selected. All right, good. Exit. Okay, next question. How to replace an audio snare with a snare sample? Okay. So we can do this quite easily using hit points. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and okay, so let's say I just want to load up so I want to take the snare sample, and then we're going to take it to Groove Agent. So I'm going to have Groove Agent selected here. I'm going to just go to my snare track here. So I'll get to like my snare, and as we work on this, I'm going to basically find the hit points. Now, as we look at hit points and we solo the editor, we can see that we have some hit points that aren't the snare. So we may want to just kind of increase the threshold here to just include the snare, but not like the kick that's bleeding through or the hi-hat. And then within the particular, I'm going to go ahead and select, let's say, the Groove Agent kit. But within the sample editor, we see this little create, and we can say let's create MIDI Notes. I'm going to put it on to the selected track where we have Groove Agent loaded. I want it to be on D1 where my snare samples are, and I want to retain the dynamic velocity. So when I hit OK, we now have MIDI parts. So if I mute the snares, and this gives me a lot of flexibility because I can take the snare and say, okay, I just want the snare louder. So we go to mixer, say, okay, let's go to our snare. And then if I wanted to tune the snare, we could just come right over there and just kind of tune it, add more room, more overhead, depending on the kit. And all the original dynamics. So once you find the hit points, make sure that you kind of adjust the threshold accordingly so that you're only getting those particular ones. And so as we look at the editor, you'll see under the hit points tab, create, you'll see MIDI notes. And then as you create those MIDI notes, we could assign those to the track that we have selected or create a new MIDI track and have that automatically replace or augment drum samples. Okay, so you see a question. When I turn on an audio track into an object through Dolby Atmos setup, I can't see the audio level on the track anymore. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look. All right, so we have kind of so if you have headphones on, you may hear this over the kind of spinning around as we're doing. So if we looked at our panner, all right, so let's go ahead and make this into an object. We'll come over. So we have this kind of set into our bed mode. So let's get to project, ADM authoring. All right, so as we're doing this, I still see the audio here. So I still kind of see it functioning. So let me know if I did something differently than how you did. All right, so we see a question. I have a small problem. The X for crossfade doesn't work. Why? Okay, so let me just go back to a different project. So it could be that, you know, depending on what is selected for your crossfade. So I'll just come back. All right, so I just want to do kind of a crossfade. So, you know, if we have two audio events, you know, so if we hit X and nothing is selected, doesn't know what to crossfade. If I have two adjacent events next to each other and I hit the crossfade, then that works. But make sure that you actually have something selected that's crossfadeable. Because if nothing is selected and you know you don't have either event selected and you hit X, it's not going to do the crossfade. But if both events are selected and you hit the X, that you will see the crossfade appear. All right, so we have a question. How can I create an automation from the peak envelope of audio, and specifically how can I turn up the knob when the audio is fading out? All right, so let's say we have our audio fading out. All right, so let's say if you wanted to compensate for that, you could just grab the line tool. So we see a line tool here. We'll grab our line tool and we can say, okay, right from where that point is fading out, we could do the opposite with automation. So you could do something like that, but it may not kind of do that automatically. You might just have to kind of, you know, put in your points, but this way you could match it up accurately in just a few mouse clicks. Okay, so you see a question. Sample editor tracking Cubase. I could view the customized as per the. Can the view be customized as per the key editor to only show pitches in the MIDI piece? I see the entire 6-octave view, so every time everything is tiny to work with. So you only see the key, like the key editor, when you're actually, working in Vari Audio. So if you don't have Vari Audio, so let's say if we blow this up and we go to Vari Audio, you could see this, and if it's kind of like very small, just go to the keyboard here, and then all you have to do is click on the mouse, and you can do this in the MIDI key editor as well, same method, where you see it kind of turn into a bit of a compass over this part of the keyboard, and then you could zoom in and out. But so this way, if you're seeing everything, all you have to do is just kind of zoom in, and you could navigate up and down. If you move your mouse vertically and move your mouse horizontally, you could zoom vertically like so. So this way you could easily kind of navigate and see your different parts. But that's only for the most part, when people are in the sample editor, you're going to be doing stuff that doesn't have any reference to a MIDI key editor. It's only in Vari Audio. And we want you to be able to, move notes to any particular key. Okay, a question. What is the best method in Cubase to standardize, i.e. even out all notes in the bass line so the volume of each note is identical throughout? I don't think it's compression or normalization. So if it's an audio file, especially for bass lines, bass parts are often specifically compressed for this. So a compressor would be an appropriate tool if you see kind of dynamic levels fluctuating significantly. So let's go over, just open up a different project for variety here. So just all right, so let's listen to the great Jorge. Listen to George Casas play, the late great George Casas. All right, so let's say we have a number of different edits here, and these will be kind of different volumes. So we'll just have kind of inconsistent volumes. So we'll go ahead and listen to just the bass here. So let's say this part's louder. All right, so I'll just make the cuts a little closer here just for demonstration purposes. All right, so if your bass player is doing this type of stuff for you, all right, so let's go to our channel strip, and we have a bit of compression already on it, but I'll just turn that off. All right, so we're just gonna put it in the standard compressor, so we want kind of the quiet parts. So now we see that those parts that kind of jumped in volume. So we want to set maybe the minimum threshold here. So you know that's could be like 10 dB difference in volume. We could have that consistency just using a compressor on the bass part. So without that, we would notice like, excuse me, we would notice just like, there'd be just very, a lot of differences in the dynamics without a compressor. So that's, very typical use of when you'd use a compressor. All right, so we see question. Hi, Greg. Greetings from the Detroit suburbs. Thanks for all you do for the community. I've learned so much watching the Club Cubase videos, though my schedule precludes me from being able to participate directly in live streams. I'm having issues with Steinberg VSTi plugins, the system running Windows 11 with Cubase Pro 12. The problem to me is the Steinberg instruments will stop working if I turn off a MIDI controller when an instrument track is selected. When I turn the controller back on, no sound will come out even if the track and come back to it. This doesn't happen with my third-party plugins. The reason this is important to me is I frequently need to turn off my guitar MIDI controller, a Fishman triple play, for either musical reasons or to conserve the relatively short battery life of the controller. I've also noticed that that the same behavior occurs with my Nectar Panorama keyboard controller. So I would, I tested this because I have a Nectar as well. I don't have a Fishman triple play, and I did it on Windows 10 and Mac OS, where I just kind of took off, let's say I'll load up Pad Shop example here, and so just load an instrument. Or I'll just do retro log. Okay, so I wonder like what your default MIDI input is, and if it's set to all MIDI inputs, and let me see, I can do this without destroying my whole live setup here. I think I have it connected into this USB hub. So I just powered off my Nectar controller. So I go to all MIDI inputs. My Nectar controller isn't there. I'm going to turn it back in. So I'm connecting it back. And now my Nectar is automatically being seen. So I can now just come right over here and play the Nectar controller. So we go to my all MIDI inputs and the Nectar controller. So I think it was Cubase 8.5. Before that, like the MIDI wouldn't kind of be hot swappable and you'd have to restart. But since 8.5 and forward, that's automatically kind of taken care of. And I did it on my Windows and Mac, but maybe if you had this set that for a particular MIDI input port, that when you took it away, it went to another device, and when you go to play it, but also check to see if you play the sounds, if the sounds are playing, and then, but it should work, and I tried it on both my Mac and PC computers without any problems, so I don't think it's the so maybe the plugins are routed to a specific MIDI input port, and maybe that has to be set up again. All right. All right, and we got through those questions earlier. All right. I know Michael Pierce had sent a project. I didn't get a chance to look at it in detail, so I'll get to that, Michael Pierce, on Friday's live stream, if that's okay. Let me go back to our live questions and jump back to our chat. All right, so we see question, Greg. Any chance of DAW project file format? So I think it's still very early, but I think while it's a novel concept, we've had 6 or 7 standards to try to do this. I think I haven't researched it a lot, but if you're using built-in plugins with any program, and then you have you go to open up the project. If those plugins aren't available in your host, then it doesn't make much sense. If you have program features, like let's say, okay, we have chord pads and maybe other programs don't have that, or they don't have Vari Audio, how does that translate over? So I think as, it gets, that it's not going to be as viable. I haven't seen it. I haven't, I just kind of briefly read conceptually what it's doing, but I see a lot more problems of, if programs are going to have to all be very similar to make it work. And what about unique features that are beneficial for customers? So I think, we've supported many standards in the past, like did, AES 3.1, which was a similar standard. No one embraced it. So there's a lot of details that it doesn't necessarily catch, and a lot of proprietary things in programs, and being able to access plugins that are resident to a particular DAW that wouldn't translate over. So, but we'll see how it develops. All right. See that Michael Pierce gave up coffee a few years ago, and he also gave up tea. He's no longer welcome with his family after giving up tea. So you're the first audio engineer, recording studio engineer that I've seen that's given up coffee. So I have 1 cup of mocha for breakfast, and that's my daily treat. Okay. All right, so we see from David Gibson, hi Greg, I would really appreciate your advice. When recording vocals, I struggle to get the realistic vocal. What is the best EQ plugin to use to get the best results? So I think, often you want to make sure that you're getting, if you're thinking of getting the best vocal with an EQ, try microphone placement, try a different microphone, try a different room. Like those things can often solve the problems. The one thing that I would always do with EQ would be to, as you have a particular track is on vocals, is, probably do something like, okay, I just want to do like roll off some low end. If you have processing, try to turn that off. And if you have an example of a recording that you want to share, you can share it with me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. But most of the time, if I remember doing a session when I worked in the studio in New York, and we had Paul Carrick, the guy, amazing singer, and he's the guy who sang "Tempted" by Squeeze, just an amazing, legendary singer. And we actually recorded him with a 57 in the control room, and it sounded like Paul Carrick. It was just so sometimes, just, microphone placement. Try not to overthink things. Try to keep your signal path clear and clean and direct. Try not to use a lot of processing. I see, people sometimes using 15 or 16 plugins on their vocal. And it's like, oh, this is for this word. This plugin is for that word. And, it seems a little much to me. But if you want to share, like an audio example that could be helpful for me to maybe give you some advice on. All right, you see Jazz Dude saying great bass licks, tasty licks. I got it's my friend Clay Oswald wrote that song. It's George Casas, passed away a couple years ago, but he was kind of bass player for Gloria Estefan for a long time, and also played with. I think he was the bass player in when David Coverdale and Jimmy Page got together, so he was a bass player in that project as well. All right, so we see Jeff Sabelsky, speaking of the CC121, I still wish they could incorporate at least the transport buttons with Dorcos. That's something I could contrive with the control keys. I've never set up a transport in Dorco, but I think it'll just kind of accept MIDI messages. So let's see if we can. I'll have to renew, but I'll look at it for the live stream on Friday. But as long as it's kind of MIDI mappable in like a learning, then you should be able to do it. But I'll take a look and see if we can get it set up for Friday. I'll get my license renewed. So you see Neil Conway says, I love that bass has some spine and touch of bite. Yeah, so I think it's a Warwick bass that he often played. Okay, so we see, hi Greg, is there any way you can copy the EQ from a vocal and copy it to another? So if it's just like the EQ on the tracks, so let's say if I am here, and we want, let's say we have that as our EQ setting for some reason. I think that we could copy the EQ setting, go to different track and paste the EQ setting. If you wanted to kind of extract the EQ from like the sonic characteristics of one file to another, what you could do, we just get this set up. Okay, so let's say if these had like different EQs on it. All right, so I'm just gonna reset. All right, so let's say we have this one is. All right, and let's say if we listen to these, and we're gonna make these. So let's say we have these are kind of darker. All right, so I'm going to put these into just a quick bus. So let's add a group channel. I'm gonna make sure all the tracks are selected. Okay, and on this group channel, I'm gonna open this up, and we could put a plugin called, so if you have like a vocal recording and you're like, oh, I really like that sound and I want to kind of apply that EQ to, if you go under EQ, you'll see a plugin called Curve EQ. And this we want to kind of come over here. We'll put this in, I think, in average mode, and we'll do static match. So I'm going to play the first files here. And then what we could do a take, and let's go to the file that sounds much darker. Okay, so we'll play this one, which is darker. Sorry, let me just close this out. So let's say this one is kind of much darker. So then we could let's do a take of this. All right, and let me just make sure this is going out. We can send this to our new group that we just created, group 15. Okay, so what you could do is come over here and take like the 2 different takes, and then you could say we want this as a reference and apply it to that one. So you could take the EQ curve from one track to another track. So we see from Neil, was that bass with fingers or picks? I believe George usually played finger style. He was one of the greats. All right, so we see from Eric Fox, is there any news for Cubase 13 release date? So generally we don't necessarily release any information until the product is shipping. We did have, what was announced last week was that we are changing our online shop providers, and during that process that the online shop is closed. So I wouldn't imagine that Cubase 13 would be released while the online shop is closed, just if I could speculate. All All right, so we see from Michael Pierce, discovery from years ago, the channel EQs do avoid cramping seemingly. The old cramping EQs included as an alt option. But a question, do the stock plugins oversamples? I'm not sure if they do oversample or not. So a lot of times, they try, oversampling is one technique to kind of get stuff, and sometimes you use kind of different algorithms to kind of get you to the same spot. But if you wanted to look at like some of the options with channel EQ, you could come over here and see kind of the different settings. So if you want to do different high shelves, low shelves, there's parametric 1, parametric 2, so you could get kind of different shapes in there if you're not familiar with it. But I'm not positive that it does oversampling, but I know it's a lot of people's kind of favorite stock EQ. It's like for Elliot Shiner, who's like, a master audio engineer, that's his favorite EQ. All right, we see Pablo's made it back. All right. So we see Jeff Sabelski says new guitar bass strings help with a crisp, tight bass articulation. So yeah, you can make any bad bass sound much better by getting new strings on it a lot of times if you want kind of a brighter tone. Okay, reading through comments. All right, great to see Rob from Tarpon Springs. Glad you can make it today. All right, so we see a nice comment from Peter. Just says, thank you, Greg. You never disappoint in our great live stream, packed with valuable tips and tricks. Have yourselves a great work week, folks. And he has to go spark up his barbecue. All right. So you just see comments from Lauren Scott that Waves has a two-way compressor called MV2. So there is, if you go to your dynamics in Cubase, there's kind of an up-down compressor as well that you could use. So I think if you go to Squasher, you could have kind of your up-down settings as well. So there's a built-in one with Cubase. All right, so we see Dave Gibson just says, thank you, Greg, all the way from the UK. Keep up the great work. So hope to see you on many future live streams. All right, so you see a question, will you see an intro offer in Cubase 13? So generally, in the past, there hasn't been introductory offers. So, but there's obviously discounts for upgrading, but generally in the past, there hasn't been intro offers for Cubase when released. So. Okay, reading through comments. Jeff Sabelski sold his Yamaha tenor sax and he's sad. You see Yamaha. Pablo has some Yamaha snares. Okay, reading through. Okay, so we see from the Heartbreak Time Machine says, I just want to say the Arturia surface integration is great. And it's got a new Keylab 88 installed today, and Cubase loves it. So the Arturia controllers, when I've kind of played them when I was more in music stores, I always thought they were kind of really well designed. So I think Axel Hartman may have done it. It's a wonderful designer in our industry. Okay, so we see the artist known as Love says, everyone please hit the like button. And Jeff Sabelski is Smasher number 97, and he almost forgot. All right, so you see Jazz Dude says this Hangout had some really advanced tips, especially the Project Logical Editor, MIDI Logical Editor. Start was great. I must rewatch it tomorrow. So I'll probably do a dedicated tutorial on some of those. All right, so I think we're at the end of questions. We'll see if there's any more that sneak in. Hope that everyone has learned a tip or trick, and if you have, make sure you hit the like button and then also hit the subscribe button if you haven't done that. So we see it's a question from Jeff Sabelski. When is the last time Greg was in a Guitar Center or a local music store? So I used to go to stores all the time, like 30 to 40 a month, constantly when I was traveling. I think I went to a Guitar Center to get a strap lock for my son for his Christmas gift. I went to Washington Music, which is kind of our local store in the Washington, D.C. area, which anyone's been to. Is like one of the last great kind of music stores in America. So I was there in the spring. But always loved going. I was in a local store getting some, just a little mom and pop store getting valve oil for my son last week as well. But I still love going into music stores. I miss being able to travel and see. I always look for used basses. So I miss seeing that. All right, so we see a question from the Heartbreak Time Machine. How do I activate a single lane of controller data? All right, so if we have MIDI parts here, and I want to, we can see it'll generally default to velocity, but if we wanted to put in modulation, I could now just come over here and draw in modulation data as we want. So let me know if that's what you want to do. So we see a question from Donald Duck. Just says, if I buy Cubase 12 now, do I get a free upgrade to 12, or should I wait with my Cubase purchase until release? So I can't say for sure, but I think that you would probably be safe. But I could only speculate. So Jeff Sabelski, what's the best local store you were ever in, Greg? I love Washington Music. Just I got my first real trumpet there when I was a kid, and it's still the same. It's family run. I've seen 3 generations of the Levin family run it. They have if you wanted to buy a Les Paul, you could go try like 19 different Sunburst Les Pauls or 50 Strats, and it's so Washington Music's always special. Like House of Guitars is because I love looking at basses. Is kind of like a museum in Rochester, New York. I think that's really wonderful. I used to like Rhythm City was always a lot of fun in Atlanta because the owner would buy so much gear, and sometimes you would just find like like a new DX7 30 years after release, still in the box. So he would sometimes have vintage gear that was brand new. So, but there's lots of great stores throughout the country, but I still kind of Chuck Levin's Washington Music fan personally. All right. All right, Gerald Ely says, love the stream. All right. All right, said Heartbreak Time Machine, can I have multiple lanes of controller data, i.e. CC11? So if you have to want to see multiple lanes, just come over here, click on the plus, and then you could say, okay, I want to see, let's come over here. So I want to see expression. So now I can see expression and modulation. So you could just kind of come over here and add different controller lanes and make them visible. So, and then you could save these as presets like we showed kind of right at the very beginning of the live stream. So you can say, okay, I want to see, this is what Nari Soul likes to see. This is what we had a question on earlier, what they want to see. So, all right, you see Jeff Spelsky's getting ready for their oboe student. We see Jeff Sabelsky says, come to Music Connection if you're ever in Chico. So I like going to Skips in Sacramento as well. I don't think it's too far from Chico. All right. All right, so you see Heartbreak Time Machine says I want multiple CC11 lanes. Yes, then pick the one I want to use. So you could have, you could have one lane for each automation type. But if you wanted to have, let's say we have this and we have our CC11, I could come here and do a track version. So I could duplicate the version, come over here, and then on this particular track, I could have different CC data. Let's duplicate the version, and I want to just have completely different. And then I could now just come over here and say, oh, did I like this one more? Or did I like this one more? Or did I like this one more? So you have one lane, but you could have different track versions, where each version could have different events in there. Let's see, Heartbreak Time Machine says Skips is great. All right, so we see, hey Greg, peace and blessings. Running a little late today. I would like to know if there's a brush sound that could be triggered from Groove Agent from V-Drums for a jazz track. I don't think that there's any standard, but probably the best brush sounds, let's see if I have it on, is the Simon Phillips Jazz Drums. So let's see if I have a license for that installed. I think I have it installed. I may not have the license, but yeah, I think we're good. So let's say I just want to do like a jazz waltz brush. So this is an add-on, but if you come over here, so let's just say, and I'll just, and you get the benefit of having Simon Phillips actually play on your track for you. But this way you could just kind of come over here when you go to the instrument itself. So you could choose whether you want it to be brush or not. So you could just come over there. So that's probably like the best brush sounds for doing jazz drums is, and that's an add-on pack of the Simon Phillips jazz drums. So check that out. See, Heartbreak Time Machine says about is Mo 8 it skips. All right, John Costigan just says, thank you, Greg, for the intrepid Cubasers who help us all as well. So the Heartbreak Time Machine says the drop down. Thank you. I guess Pablo liked that sound a lot. It's like, sounds really nice. Please stop, Greg. So yeah, here, Pablo, for you. Let's go ahead and just kind of. And then you can get different levels of complexity. So you get your different dynamics. So it's a wonderful kit for that. See Pablo just saying, "Arg, Greg is trolling me." So yeah, listen to Gareth has a new song I played bass on yesterday. Or he did some great brush drums on it. Had some, so. All right, we'll see if there's any more questions that sneak in. But yeah, definitely check out Pablo. You got to get the Simon Phillips drums. So it's phenomenal. He's such a nice guy too. Just incredibly humble and such a great player. Just makes everything look easy every time he plays something so hard. All right, wonderful to see Roger on. Let's see, I think we're out of questions. We'll see if there's any more questions that sneak in. If not, we'll wrap up just a couple minutes early. I want to thank everyone again for taking part of your morning, evening, afternoon, and learning more about Cubase products. You could always send questions in advance to clubcubase at steinberg.de. We do these live streams on Tuesdays, and we do these on Tuesdays and Fridays starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. And we'll be doing this again on Friday. We'll have our Zoom meetup at the end of the month in October for I believe it's going to be on Halloween. So I'll have to stop probably the Zoom meetup at 5 because it's a big deal in our neighborhood. So all right, so we see Lauren Scott just saying thank you for what you do, Greg. So I'm just glad to help. And I think it's a wonderful community, and I think it's a great format for teaching people a lot about Cubase. So, all right, we'll give it our 20, 30 seconds. I know there's a delay from when I speak to when you guys hear it. So we'll just give just another little bit of time. If not, we'll wrap up. All right, so with that, we will go ahead and wrap up. Thanks, everyone, for all the wonderful questions. It's just grateful that everyone makes such a wonderful community, and we want everyone to make better music with their Cubase and be smarter and work better with it so you get your work done and enjoy the experience. And we'll see everyone back on Friday. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy. Take care.